at the Niagara-on-the-Lake Museum, which is owned and operated by the Niagara Historical Society in Niagara-on-the-Lake, Ontario, Canada. A lot of people come to Niagara, they think of Niagara Falls, which of course is one of the wonders of the world.
Sure.
It's amazing to go and look. But when you go to Niagara Falls, you need to come down to Niagara-on-the-Lake and see this unique town with the, as we mentioned, it's a wonderful mix of the heritage and the wine and even beer now coming through, and even the fruit. If you're driving and you can stop at any fruit stand during the fruit seasons and get amazing fruit.
Well, it's getting known for that too, because I've heard that down where I live.
Yeah.
So, you know what I mean?
Oh, it's an amazing experience that you can really have here. We're really lucky, and it is unique from Niagara Falls, and I think it's very important for people to come and check out Niagara-on-the-Lake, right?
It's huge. It's huge.
Yeah.
It's huge. It's a must-see destination if you're here.
I think so.
It's so close, and then I really think the synergy between the town and you guys, it's just, you have to come here, spend a few hours, get a taste of the town, and take it with you.
Yes.
Because you'll understand the town better.
Exactly.
What is this? Is this a bureau? What is this?
This is, so it's a bureau that would have been similar to what would have been at Queen's Royal Hotel. And actually up here we have a picture of the Prince and Princess of Wales in 1902, the future king, of course. This is Queen Victoria's son, who came to the Queen's Royal Hotel. So this is them sitting out in front of the Queen's Royal Hotel. They're actually quite perturbed because it's in the middle of the night, and there has been some issues at the Queen's Royal Hotel of electricity, or a gas leak that happened. And so everyone has been asked to evacuate the hotel. And so, of course, this happens when royalty are visiting in Niagara-on-the-Lake. And Niagara-on-the-Lake has a very strong relationship with royalty. Of course, it's been visited by several of the royal family. And so this is one instance in 1902 when the Prince and Princess of Wales come to visit. And they have to sit on the porch in the middle of the night because of a gas leak.
They don't look too cranky. A couple of them do.
A little perturbed, I think.
It's funny though, because back then, in order to even leave, because of royalty, so you just can't walk out in your PJs, so everybody's got to get redressed, and
Don't they look dapper?
Yeah, and somebody managed to snap a shot, which is hilarious.
Yeah, exactly.
So now, what became of that hotel?
Unfortunately, with the emergence of cars and tourism, people hopping in the car and going off, and then eventually the Great Depression hits, it was torn down. They were behind on their taxes with the town of Niagara-on-the-Lake, and they couldn't meet the bills, and they had to close down. And then it was eventually, everything was sold off by auction, so you can actually find pieces of the Queen's Royal Hotel in the community. We have a number of pieces in our collection that relate to it.
Right.
But, so it was torn down. Eventually, parts of the property were sold off, and now you get, part of the property is Queen's Royal Hotel, so everyone gets to at least enjoy the park area of where it was.
Right, and I'm sure these are coveted pieces, right?
Oh, yes, yeah, great history.
This cubby here, what is this? Anything?
Yeah, so, well, Laura Secord, of course, is a big part of War of 1812 history. So this is just a bust of Laura Secord that was done, and Laura Secord is a heroine in Canadian history. She warned the Americans, she warned the British, of course, about an impending attack by the American soldiers during the War of 1812, and is deemed a hero. So we talk about her story because it happened in Queenston. That's where she lived, and so she's a local, but she's seen as a national hero in Canadian history.
Well, it's the Paul Revere of
right. Yes,
time, right?
the Americans are coming.
Yeah.
Right, and so actually the British were able to counterattack, and they anticipated the ambush. So
they were.
They won the battle. Of course.
Yeah, I'm never gonna air this, but I really think Britain should have won. I think the independence of America. This is a whole, somebody could write a book series on this.
I'm sure.
But I think because you see the British influence in Canada, and that begat this beautiful country that you have. And
so these are some, pieces from the Queen's Royal Hotel here, and then sort of an example of an older bathing suit that you might have seen because it's around the 1920s of what people people would have worn when they were bathing in the Niagara River or Lake Ontario as well. So it's a really beautiful piece.
They got a golf club there too.
Yes, of course, because we did have golfing here. We have one of the oldest continuously used golf courses, the Niagara-on-the-lake Golf Club, which has Fort Mississauga is on the grounds as well. It's a beautiful golf club that you must check out if you're able to get in and golf throughout the summer. And then their golf clubhouse restaurant is delicious food as well. Yeah, so we do have a long history of golfing as well, of course, in this town. And then we sort of end up in the very tail end where we talk more about recent history. We've got some display of that talks about the fruit industry with different stamps and fruit measuring tools as well in the baskets, because of course the fruit industry is a big part of our culture here in Niagara, and it has been for several years with the fruit orchards first being planted. And then we touch upon the Shaw Festival, of course, that really took flight in the 1970s and really revamped our town, or contributed to the revamping of our town as a tourist town.
So it's a real seminal, like we're kind of in this like lull. And the Shaw Festival comes around and it starts getting built. And
well, yeah, I mean, the Shaw Festival was a big part. It was growing in the 1970s. They had the Shaw Festival Theatre built, and the shows in combination with some wineries starting to pop up and B&Bs popping up and hotels being renovated. It really was the emergence of the new tourism. And I mean, even thinking about the 1960s, 1970s, comparing to today, it's a completely different town. We were a very rural, quiet town, even though, you know, back in the early 1900s, we had lots of visitors who did heritage tourism, of course. They wanted to see the old battlefields, Fort George, Fort Mississauga, Queenston Heights and such. But with the changes in the 1970s, and then there's a real active group that are looking to preserve the heritage buildings at that time as well.
And
as
thank
we move
God,
forward.
right? Because if it wasn't for them, this town wouldn't resemble what it is today.
Exactly, yeah, and doing a lot of the research on the homes, and so tourists really start to come, and I mean, look at our community today. It's a huge tourism or community during the summertime.
But it doesn't look fake, though. That's so, you know, it's my first time here, so and I say there's towns and people. It's kind of ironic and kind of funny because of my show, but there's certain towns and certain places that I save because I don't want, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I don't want to delve into them too early, and I also don't want to get a misinterpretation. So I'll go when there's a job to do there. And if not, I just keep it on the back shelf. And so it's my first day here, and the authenticity of the place is the first thing that I noticed. It doesn't look Disneyfied. It doesn't look like Main Street, you know.
No, and I think that is actually an active thing of the town of Niagara-on-the-Lake too.
It's very smart.
They've been very good at monitoring the progress of the town and trying not to look Disney as you looked, as you mentioned, right?
They're very, because my first thing was, oh, wait a second, you know what I mean? Like, is this real? But I mean, just from doing this and living in so many places, you could get an eye for it, you know? And you're like, no, this is the real deal. This is totally authentic. It's a living, breathing town.
It is, yeah.
And tourism plays a major role in the component of the town. And you can see that in the shops, but you wouldn't have the town if you didn't have the tourism.
Exactly.
But it also doesn't look dressed up to the point where it looks false.
No, and I think part of the draw, of course, is the beauty of the town, which is the heritage buildings that have been preserved through research here done at the museum with our records, and through those active members in the, you know, the 70s, 80s, and such that really worked to preserve Niagara-on-the-Lake. So you get an amazing combination of the culture and the heritage and the wine, the agricultural history. It's a nice fusion. You really need to come to during the summertime, though, because the flowers that the town does in this community really amplify the heritage buildings.
Right?
It's that Main Street. It's stunning.
I've seen
the middle of
pictures,
summer.
yeah.
I'm sure
like
you've seen the photos, right? It's gorgeous. So
the sweater is, I'm curious, what is this?
Yeah, so of course, you know, we do need to talk about more recent history. So this is actually a sweater from the old Niagara District Secondary School that existed here. There isn't a high school in Niagara-on-the-Lake anymore. So we do have a temporary display. We have students actually do change up our displays of the small cabinets every summer, so they learn about exhibits and museums and such. So what people can do, we actually display more pieces. So right now it's talking about former schools that were here, the Parliament Oaks School and the high school that used to exist here. So people kind of explore a bit more. And some people really do enjoy this.
Oh, if you went to school here, you'd love it.
You went to school here, or even people kind of going like, oh my goodness,
takes you
like
back,
my past is becoming part of the museum's history, but it's a bit of active collecting, right? Because I know it's recent history, but in another 20 or 50, years, this is going to be strong
Real
history.
yeah.
So, but we need to talk about it. We don't have the high school here anymore.
No,
so.
and that's part of the history. Where's the high school?
It's out on Niagara Stone Road, actually, in East-West Line. So that's where it used to be, but now kids are shipped out of town.
Yeah, it's like that everywhere. It's odd, right? And you would think, I don't know what the reason was for that, but this town is so walkable, it almost, right? You're like,
well, the town is much larger than what you see. So a lot of tourists will see the Heritage District and its beauty, but it's actually made up of a number of villages. So there's Queenston and St. David's and Virgil and McNabb. So there's all these communities, and once you go to them, they're walkable. But there's a lot of agricultural land in Niagara-on-the-Lake, again, with the fruit industry and the wineries. You see vineyards everywhere. So there's lots of various communities in Niagara-on-the-Lake, and it's really quite beautiful.
Yeah, and they all have their own role to play in the context.
Yes, and even, Queenston has amazing history and a lot of heritage buildings as well, great art galleries and national historic sites or provincial historic sites are there.
And
so.
this is the jewel.
The Heritage District, this is the tourist area, yeah.
And it's good to have that because everything kind of disseminates out from this point. It's like such a peak experience, and then you can kind of almost go find. And
then you explore more, people really do fall in love with Niagara-on-the-Lake.
Yeah, so, I believe me.
Yeah, be careful when you come because you will fall in love with Niagara-on-the-Lake and this museum. I promise you.
Yeah, you're just like,
Yeah, be careful.
You're like, emigrate.
Yeah. So the building that we're in right now, this is Memorial Hall. So this is the original museum building that was opened in 1907, and we do temporary gallery exhibits. So we change these up every year in the fall and in the spring. So we do a winter exhibition, and then we do a summer exhibition as well. So the current exhibition that we have on is called A Piece of Her Mind, and so it's a lot of quilts and coverlets from our collection that relate to a local woman in our history, and so we're displaying those. We're talking about their stories and their history, and it's a really unique piece. And then in the summer of this year, we're actually doing one called All Along the Waterfront. So it's talking about Niagara-on-the-Lake's relationship with Niagara River and the Lake Ontario as well.
Which is huge. I mean,
we're right on the water. Niagara-on-the-Lake, it's in our name, right?
Fold it in.
Yeah. So, so we change this gallery up. This is where our temporary displays are every year. And then we have an upper gallery as well that talks about different parts of our history.
Nice. And
which
we should
is really
head
great.
up there, you think?
Yeah, sure, we can. This is the Janet Carnahan Gallery. So a number of the pieces that you see on display here actually tell a story on their own. Or we have photographs that are really unique for Niagara-on-the-Lake. This is actually the very popular Queen Street and King Street intersection. You see the Prince of Wales there.
Yes.
And the apothecary. You can notice that the lovely clock tower that everyone loves to take photos with is not there yet.
Oh, wow.
So it shows sort of the early history of Niagara. But so we change up the exhibits every once in a while. It's various items.
Now, do you
interest.
guys have like a warehouse somewhere, or is it here?
No, we store everything on site.
You do?
We do have storage rooms, not in this building, but the other building. We have storage rooms for all of our collection.
Sure, because there's a lot, yes.
Yeah.
yeah. It's just a matter of figuring out what
there's
you want to pull out.
Yes, we have about 53,000 pieces in our collection, which is a massive collection for a small museum as well.
Yeah, that's huge.
Yeah,
and it's just going to keep accumulating. So that's why maybe you guys are thinking about you have to expand.
That's why we are planning to expand, or part of the reason that we're planning to expand, we need more collection space. And the other is that we don't have a programming space, but we do about an average of 80 programs a year, which is a massive amount for a small staff and a small museum. But they're really great programs, but we don't have a dedicated programming space. And so our expansion will include that as well. And then a temporary gallery for more display so we can get a lot of traveling exhibits in as well.
Sure. Oh, that's great, actually. Yeah, and that's good. Who spearheaded that, did you?
We did it as a team with the board of directors and the staff, of course.
And just like, we have
We
no
have
choice,
to. We
yeah.
have to. Our buildings, as they aren't meeting the needs of our programs and our exhibits and our collection.
Yeah, and Niagara-on-the-Lake's just getting exponentially more popular, which is
Right.
crazy when you think about it, because even from the time I've come home, I don't know what it is. I think people are developing an appreciation for this more and more as we grow and get older as a society and a culture, American and Canadian both. I think we're such a new society over here as opposed to Europe.
Yeah.
That we've kind of passed the teen years.
Yes.
And now we're kind of getting into our middle age, and we're looking back a little bit more.
And I think
know?
it's a bit too of the idea of the staycations, as I call them, like going to smaller vacations where you can drive and go and enjoy a community and then head home and not have to take perhaps a flight out of town or go to,
Travel
across
Channel.
the water, right?
Travel Channel. That's what it is.
Yes, exactly.
It's all those TV shows. You're like, we can do that. We can stay here and enjoy
Yeah.
ourselves, And this is, when you come up here, like I even noticed it too, within 3 or 4 minutes here, I was just like, it kind of like changes your mood.
It's really neat stuff. It's a really neat collection. And so this gallery as well is where we like to let our summer students come in and change up the gallery. They take something that they're interested in and they use our collection and create displays. So right now someone was really interested in our Western home, as I mentioned earlier, and so put more of our boxes on display to talk about the girls and their experiences here.
Nice. And they obviously have to get this approved through you.
Yeah, so I work with them, but they're learning.
They are the brainchild behind this.
They're the learning, it's a whole learning experience, and then they can decide whether they are interested in doing exhibits in working in museums. It's a really great opportunity for them to explore their interests, explore their skills.
I think it inspires them too. For the community, right? I mean, it's good. It's what you're about. You're about outreach, and this isn't. I think for us as generations, so if we can just fold this 20-year block in, 15-year block in, I don't look at history like my parents looked at history. Do you know what I mean? I want it to feel organic. I want it to feel present. I want it to feel current. I want it to feel reciprocal. I don't want it to be this cold, like I'm looking at the past through this lens.
Yep.
I want it to be integrated into my life. And I think it's a different change. I saw that in California. I saw that Massachusetts is a little bit different because it's the oldest part of this country, or the US. But I think I see this across our generations, that where you're just like, we want it to be more tactile now.
Yeah.
And so your job is to really facilitate that.
Yeah, and trying to engage people in history is something that all museums are trying to figure out the best way to do. And with the younger generation, in terms of technology, you really got to get into doing that as much as possible. So a lot of our temporary gallery displays actually transfer into Google Arts and Culture. We do online exhibits that way too, so we can reach out to various committees. And we were actually the first community museum to be on Google Arts and Culture in Canada.
Were you really?
So
So
yeah,
we should talk, because that's
definitely
really important if you're integrating technology into this too.
Exactly.
So the boat is super cool.
Yeah, so it's a beautiful boat, and as I mentioned, Queens Royal Hotel had a lot of leisure activities, and so this is an original boat, and we've got a photo of them out on the river. You can see Fort Niagara,
Love it.
across the way, and some of the folks on the boats here, and a lot of these boats were actually made by boat builders in Niagara-on-the-Lake, and this was recently donated in the last 5 years by a local who had it in his garage, and we said, yes, we'll take that. We don't have anything like it.
Yeah, it's super
And the fact
neat.
that we have a photo that shows the boats is really wonderful to have as
It's
well.
perfect. Yeah, I mean, and for me, that's just a really nice compliment to this, because that's it, right? I mean, those boats are the same style. I think there's the second one into the left there on the bottom.
Yep.
Yeah, all three of those actually, right?
Yeah.
And that was a popular pastime.
Yeah.
And
if you want to, if you are able to take images of her, so this is the Janet Carnahan that I talked about. So she was the president of the Niagara Historical Society when it started. She was the driver behind growing the collection and researching Niagara-on-the-Lake's history in the late 1890s, early 1900s. And she was one of our first curators as well. So she was quite a force to be reckoned with, and she wrote the history of Niagara, a nice book that is still referenced by historians today.
really, is
Yeah.
it still in print?
Yep, it gets reprinted.
You guys have a copy here? I do.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
that's awesome.
Oh, it's a massive book.
Oh, is it?
It's great. Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
it's funny though because work that people like her do, it goes without saying how important it is to the local. I mean, there's always seems to be one person that just is like, look, we gotta get this down, and if it wasn't for their efforts, you'd lose so much.
We would have lost a lot of it. And even when they started the Niagara Historical Society and started collecting, there were people who were saying, there's nothing out there. There's nothing out there that you can display or collect for history. Well, I think 125 years of the Historical Society collecting and
pieces.
existing with over 50,000 pieces proved them wrong.
Yeah.
And she was the start of that by collecting a lot of our early Upper Canadian pieces. She tracked down War of 1812 pieces and advertised all across, Ontario and even in the United States. As I mentioned, some of our early pieces came in from the United States. So they were hearing about this new museum here in Niagara-on-the-Lake.
Well, pre-internet.
Exactly.
Tracking down. So, this is a whole nother, it's a whole nother level of sleuth, that's involved. What's a Doyle report? What's that?
Well, this actually relates to the same thing, our Western home. And the Doyle report was an investigation by Andrew Doyle into Maria Rye and what she was doing and whether it was being done properly. And he wrote a very critical report about Maria Rye and her work. A lot of issues, various issues such as, monitoring the situation of the girls after they left her care, were they being looked after properly? Some of them were coming back. I mean, it's a very controversial history it helped some, and it was a very positive experience, but there's always a few stories that were negative. I mean, these children being collected from their home country where they know the community, they know other people, perhaps have family, being collected and sent overseas to a completely unknown rural community, and it can be very scary. And I mean, kids came very young to come here, and so and there was a lot of criticism about
Well, stuff happens, you know what I mean? You don't know. And back then, too, it's not like the communication was instant. I mean, you're dealing with pre-phone letters and visits and
the system for complaints and things like that. Like if a child had issues.
I can't even imagine. Now you go to the doctors, you wait a month, and you're like, oh, it's killing me to wait a month. And everything was waiting. Back. Patience was, the virtue. Different. That's where that came from, right?
Yeah.
Is the bike of any...
Well, it's of interest to people who are interested in the Scouts. So this bike was actually brought in by Israel Valderrama, who rode his bike from Columbia to Niagara-on-the-Lake for the World Boy Scout Jamboree that happened here in Niagara-on-the-Lake. So he brought in his bike because he literally rode his bike from Columbia up to Canada for this event. And it's crazy, but the 1955 World Boy Scout Jamboree was here. It was, people came from all across the world to join here in Niagara-on-the-Lake in the celebration and promote, Scouts.
Yeah. That's insane.
It
That's
is.
Crazy.
It's fascinating.
Wow, yeah, that's a bit much. And the paintings you have here, these are going to be you're going to integrate more into the gallery when you get your gallery?
Yeah, I think this will probably stay the same of being sort of an open, I almost call it an open storage aspect of display because of the various items that have their own little history. So this gallery will likely remain the same, and then we'll open up a new temporary gallery to do our temporary displays that change up every year.
It's such a cool space too.
It is, and you want to maintain the interior of the heritage building as much as possible.
Yeah.
Well, the neat thing about the pieces on display here is this display is to commemorate the Niagara Historical Society's 125 years of when it was created in 1895 and then started collecting in 1896. So the pieces on display here show some of the early items that came into the collection at that time. The Fort Mississauga Tower magazine key, one of the original pieces here. We've got the government weights and measures there and so on. So it shows a bit of what they were collecting initially. And then, they did collect some very random things. This one's called the Panama hat. So
the original Panama hat.
From Panama. So they collected, very interesting things that relate to Niagara-on-the-Lake's history, but they also collected some very weird and wacky items as well. There were hair or things from all over the world. But to us, it seems funny that they would collect things like a Panama hat or things from various countries. But the reality is, back then, people weren't traveling to those countries as much, or you didn't have the internet to find out more. And so the museum had these things on display so people could learn about various cultures around the world.
Yeah, I think the internet spoiled us, but I always say one of my ideologies is you have to go.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Still.
To really experience.
You're never going to replace that.
Yeah,
you know
but
what I mean?
back then they weren't able to.
Yeah, no, period,
so
yeah.
It's nice that they had things like that on display.
Yeah, and again, this is part of the 50,000 plus pieces that you have in storage somewhere.
Yeah.
The
museum has a really strong collection, Upper Canadian history and history that relates to War of 1812 and American history. The Polish soldiers, which a lot of them came from Buffalo. We have a very strong Polish soldier collection. We do take research requests from visitors or, anyone who might be interested in the various topics that we touch upon here today. We charge about $15 for anyone who wants to come in and look at the actual collection. If they want to look at just our regular research files, there's not a charge, but we do ask that they book an appointment ahead of time. So in terms of American history, as I mentioned, a lot of War of 1812, the Polish soldiers who came here during the First World War and trained, where a lot of them were American, and we do have a lot of that information here accessible.
Do you have a lot of genealogies?
We do, yes. And of course, with our history relating to loyalists, a lot of them being American, came up here. So we have a lot of family histories as well in terms of the collection, but also our research collection. So anyone can come in. It's best that they contact us ahead of time and book an appointment, because we are a small museum that we need to book them in advance and get ready for them to come.